Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Bava Kamma, pages 10 through 16, Yud through Tet Zayin. Amar Mar, Yashiv Rabot Shava Kesef Subin. When the Torah says you have to return something, make a payment restitution in the case of damages, it means that even things that are worth monetary value but are not money themselves may be employed in the act of making restitution. Afilu subin, even bran. Bran is a classically cheap item and something that people are not especially interested in having, but it does have a dollar value. And so if you want to make a restitution for damages, you can do so even by paying something as cheap as subin. Yud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Bechor shenitraf. Betoch shloshim yom ein podinoto. If a child was torn to pieces, killed, in that gruesome a fashion within 30 days of its birth, and this was a firstborn child, a Bechor, no Pidyon Ben is done. It's unnecessary to do so. The Gemara then has to explain why it is we're talking about nitraf, torn to pieces, as opposed to just died of natural causes. And Rashi explains that natural causes, we know it's unnecessary to redeem the child because that child didn't survive a month and therefore is arguably a nephil, is the equivalent of a stillborn. But if it died not of natural causes, the child was nitraf, then it could have lived. Arguably, a pidyon haben should have been required. Comes along the Gemara to say, no, it's actually not required. Yud bet. Tonight, we learned in a Mishnah, Bechor mochronoto tam chai. A firstborn animal can be sold when it's still in unblemished form while it's alive. However, if it was a balmum, if it had a blemish, it could be sold whether alive or having already been slaughtered, undergone shchita. Rashi explains we're talking about bisman hazeh, nowadays, not in temple times, but rather in the post-temple era when there is no possibility of offering the Bechor as a sacrifice. And we're talking about a Kohen selling the food item to another Kohen who's going to be capable of eating it. Yud Gimel, 13. What happens if an animal which was supposed to be a korban shlamim committed damaged some other entity? Well, the injured party is going to be able to collect restitution based upon the basar, the edible flesh of the shlamim, but not from the emurim, the portions of the sacrifice that get burned on top of the altar, on the mizbeach. So the Gemara says, Pshita, of course this is the case. The emurim, the sacrificial portions, they go get burned on the top of the altar for God. So well, what the Gemara is telling us is, don't think that you should have collection to make restitution from the edible parts of the korban, the basar, corresponding to the emurim. Rather, that doesn't happen. The emurim are standalone, and the restitution is only from the basar. Yud Daled. Amar Rav Yehuda. Shum ze loyelik b'kesef. So when we evaluate how much has to be paid in a case of damages, we do so with dollar figures, currency. We do not do an exchange. So, Tanan, para shezika talit, what happens if a cow damaged an article of clothing? The talit shezika para, or an article of clothing damaged a cow. And we do not say, well, I'll exchange the cow for the talis or the talis for the cow. Forget about dollar figures, we'll just do item for item. Rather, no, we don't do that. We always assess what is the dollar value and money changes hands. Or even a non-money item, but of a certain dollar value. It's not just the injured item for the injuring item. Tedvav, 15. Haze'ev, Veha'ari, Veha'dov, Veha'namer, Veha'badlas, Veha'nachash, so certain types of pretty dangerous animals are always considered muadim, forewarned. That in the dichotomy of tam versus muad, tam being a tame animal, not forewarned, and muad being forewarned, certain categories, the wolf, the lion, the bear, the bardalas, the snake, these are dangerous creatures. They're always considered forewarned. Rabbi Elazar says no. Bisman shem b'nei tarbut, and muadin. if they've been tamed, they've been domesticated, despite being of a species which happens to be pretty dangerous, still we can regard them as tam and not muad. V'anachash muad la'olam. But the snake is always considered muad because the snake is never fully domesticated, and you can't trust it. Tet zayin, 16. Ari b'reshut harabi. If a lion in the public domain causes damage, what's the rule? Daras ve'achal patur. If he tramples upon something and then eats, the owner is exempt. Taraf ve'achal. If he tears apart something and then eats, there's liability. Chayav. Why? Why should we draw a distinction between daras on the one hand, with an exemption, and taraf with the liability? So daras v'achal patur, if he tramples and eats exempt, came into orchel midrash v'havle kamo she'achla perut v'rakot v'havle shin b'shut rabim upatur. Well, it's the standard way of the lion to trample upon something and then eat. It's no different than eating for an animal to eat vegetables and fruits in the public domain. It has the category of shen, of the tooth, in the public domain, and the rule for that category is patur, exempt. Taraf lav orache. However, tearing things apart is not the standard way. It's irregular. As Rashi explains, it's a tolda de keren. It's a subcategory of keren, the horn. And the subcategory of keren, when it comes to an animal in the public domain, pays a half damage. So that's why daras is patur and taraf is chayav for the owner of that ari. Everyone have a great week.